October is definitely now over, which means it is time for my monthly wrap. Let's head on over and look at the stats. This month, I read a total of 11 books, which comprised of 4 fantasy, 1 thriller slash mystery, 1 horror, 3 sci-fi, 1 paranormal, and 1 historical fiction. For my age groups, I read 2 YA, 8 adults, which is not like me, 1 middle grade. For the lengths, I read 1 double tome, my first ever double tome, 3 tomes, 4 half tomes, and 3 novelettes, which totaled 3,961 pages. To my star ratings, I have 4 5-stars, 4 4-stars, 1 3-star, and 2 2-stars. So let's get right into it and discuss the first book that I read this month, which was this book, Vampire Kisses by Ellen Schreiber. This is a YA paranormal book, and I had a lot of fun with this book. So the basic premise is that we are following a girl whose name is Raven, who is a high schooler, and one day in class, she is asked by her teacher, what do you want to be when you grow up? And while everyone else is giving normal answers like doctor or lawyer, Raven shocks everyone in the room by saying she wants to be a vampire. We also learn through her internal monologue that she wants to receive the coveted vampire kiss, which is why the book is named as such. I end up giving this book 5 stars because I just really enjoyed this book so much. If you are someone who loves books that have a gothic tone to them, and yet are still of the YA age range, then I think this book will fit your taste. I also think if you're someone who loved the Twilight series, you will like this as well. While they are not the same, there are certain similarities. I highly recommend this book, gave it 5 stars. It was amazing. The next book that I read was the first of 2 Murphy Napier buddy read books of the month, and that book was this book. This is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Mota and Max Gladstone. So this is a dual writing style book which is pieced and parceled out between letters and narration. The book itself follows 2 women who are from 2 differing factions that are at war with each other, that are writing letters to each other. And that's really all I can tell you. It's a short book. I don't want to give away too much. This is an adult sci-fi book, and I end up giving this book 2 stars. The reason for that is because while I enjoyed the letters, I really did not enjoy, nor did I appreciate the need for the narration of the book. I just felt that if you're going to have narration, it needs to work, and my own personal opinion was that it didn't work. But if you are someone who likes reading letters along with narration, you might like this book. Also, it's an LGBTIQ plus book, and I end up giving this book 2 stars. The next book that I read is helping me to complete a goal that I have set myself between October and December of 2020, which is to complete open-ended series, and now I have done that with this series, having read the latest book that is published in this series, and that is Starsight, which is the second book in the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. This book is a YA sci-fi, and it continues the journey of Spencer, who we meet in book 1, this book. And so because this is a continuation of this book, I don't want to say too much about it because, you know, spoilers and everything, but I'll quickly tell you that Skyward revolves around a girl whose name is Spencer, who right at the beginning of the book is traveling with her father up in his spaceship because as part of his job, he rides around a spaceship because his world is attacked by an alien race known as the Krell, so his job is to go out and fight them, but they're just off in his spaceship having a nice time when suddenly the Krell start attacking, so he drops Spencer back off home. When his crew come back, they not only tell Spencer that her father has died, but that he died a cowardly death. Because of this, Spencer is treated very differently. Starsight continues on the journey, and things happen in Skyward that we discover that I can't say because it's a spoiler, that continued on in the second book. And I really feel that Brandon Sanderson did a really good job with continuing on from that thing we find out in that book in this one. The world building is so much bigger in this book, and the character development is really well executed. I end up giving this book 4 stars, and the reason for that is because I felt that there were a couple of lulls in this book, and I really didn't appreciate that. For me, I feel like I could have cut 100 pages from this book and enjoyed it a whole lot more, but that's just my own personal taste. I will say this though, if you enjoyed Skyward, then you will most likely also enjoy Starsight, because it continues on from that thing that we find out in book 1. 4 stars from me. The next book that I read in the month of October 2020 was Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. This is marketed by the actual publishers as a YA fantasy. I say that because there's been a ton of confusion from a lot of different people who have read this book as to what age range and genre it actually is. But a hot tip that I received from a fellow booktuber is, if you don't know, if you are confused, go to the publisher's website. They will tell you what they're marketing it as, and that's what I did. A lot of people found this book to be very confusing, and while I can appreciate where they are coming from, I am not going to say that I found it confusing, because I didn't. This book opens up with us meeting 4 chosen ones. So we've got the whole chosen one trope thing going on, but what makes this book different to most fantasy books when it comes to chosen ones is that these chosen ones have already fulfilled their prophecy. They've defeated the Dark One before the book even begins. So the book opens up with us seeing what's occurring during the aftermath, and also at the same time with us following these 4 characters, these 4 superheroes, if you will, going throughout their day-to-day lives. I really appreciated this because it's not something that writers tend to do. I love that Veronica Roth took creative liberty to say, you know what, stuff that. Everything that occurs up to and including killing the bad guy, let's just have that all happen before this book even begins, and I really enjoyed that. However, once we get about a quarter of the way through, something happens which takes them off on another quest of something that they have to do because they're chosen ones, and I did not appreciate that she still went into doing that anyway. I wish she had just left that alone. I found the second and third quarters to be just something that I didn't enjoy, especially considering the setup that we get in the first quarter. But I did also enjoy the finale of this book. I thought the finale was done really, really well. I thought the character development for this book was done incredibly well. By the time we got to not even a quarter of the way through, I felt very grounded in this world. I felt like I knew who these characters were. And Veronica Roth always does a really good job with her characters as far as I'm concerned, at least laying that groundwork so that we know them and so that we feel invested in them. So I did appreciate that. But all things coupled together, I gave this book 3 stars. The next book that I read was the second and final book that I read for the Murphy Napier Buddy Read Book of the Month, and that book was this book, The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This book is an adult historical fiction, and as you guys may know, that's not for me, and yet Carlos Ruiz Zafón might have just changed my mind, because this guy was an amazing writer. Unfortunately, I found out after I finished reading this book and had fallen in love with it so much that I wanted to know more about the author, that 3 months ago in June, unfortunately, Carlos Ruiz Zafón passed away, which is so sad because he was so young, and the talent that he has to write the way that he does, and to take someone like me who is an absolute non-fan of any type of historical fiction and potentially turn me on to historical fiction is amazing. Carlos Ruiz Zafón, may you rest in peace. So this book follows a boy whose name is Daniel, whose father takes him to a bookstore called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books, which is a bookstore where old classic books come to have sanctuary. While Daniel is there, he is given a copy of The Shadow of the Wind, and he absolutely loves this book. He loves it so much that he's enticed to do some research on the author, and what ensues is an amazing journey. It's not a quest, but it is a journey, and Oh my gosh, the journey itself was really good. I really enjoyed the plot of this book. I really enjoyed meeting all the different characters and going through everything that Daniel goes through with him. The biggest thing I loved about this book was the writing style. Carlos Ruiz Zafón had a gift, and that gift was to write a book with a simplistic writing style that is incredibly easy to read and yet comes across like it is a classical writing style, kind of like what you would see back in the day with your classic books. It is written in modern day, easy to read English, but it reads like a beautiful classic book. Even though it's really simplistic, this guy, oh my gosh, I need to read more of his work. And not surprisingly, I gave this book 5 stars. The next book that I read is a book that was recommended to me by a subscriber, which helped me to fulfill a goal that I'd set in January, which was to read 2 books that 2 different subscribers recommended to me. That book was called The Forest of Silence by Emily Rodda. This is book 1 in the Deltora Quest series. It is a middle grade fantasy, and it is a novella. It's really short. Basically, in this world, we have a belt that means a lot to the people of Deltora. It is called the Belt of Deltora. It has the leather strap, and it also has these 7 or 8 gemstones attached to it. One day the belt goes missing and everyone tries to find it. Then one day the strap shows up, but the gemstones that were attached to it are missing, and we now need to go and re-find them. This book was so much fun. It was so refreshing to read a novella after reading a very long book with The Shadow of the Wind. But it's a YA, and it has your usual YA things that you would expect, including plot conveniences. But in saying that, it was just a lot of fun to read. I ended up giving this book 4 stars, and the reason for that is because for the first half of the book, we are following two characters. Then in the second half of the book, we're following 2 completely different characters, and I found that to be incredibly unnerving. But despite that, I did still love this book enough. The next book that I read was my very first double tome, book 1 in the Stormlight Archives, The Way of Kings. This was amazing. Now, I read this book as 2 separate parts, because this is how they come in Australia. So I'm going to quickly give you my star ratings for them. I gave part 1 for The Way of Kings 4.5 stars, and I gave part 2 for The Way of Kings 5 stars. I then ordered specifically from America the 1 book binder, and I'm really happy that I have this book, so now let's talk about it. So, this is an adult epic fantasy. Like, when I say epic, I mean epic. This particular version is 1,001 pages long, but the 2 books that I read coupled together are 1,119 pages long, which is what both of them makes them double tomes. It's a multi-perspective book. Now, it also, being a multi-perspective book, deals with then and now, because one of the characters that we are following, we are seeing with him what's happening currently in present day, and we also get flashbacks to his past. I love this book. I thought it was amazing. However, a couple of quick things for you to keep in mind is that it took me a while to feel like I was grounded in this world, so please do bear that in mind. It's not called a country, but imagine it's a country, and then you have states that are here, 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 and then we start the book and we're here, then we go there, 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 there. It takes a while for you to get all this down pat. But once you do, man, are you in for a great ride. I've actually done a review on this book that is a dedicated spoiler-free and spoiler review, and I'll leave the link to that up there so you can go and check that out. But man, did I love this book. And if I were to be rating the 1 book bind-up, I would undoubtedly give it 5 stars. After finishing The Way of Kings, I then was listening to an audiobook, which I then ordered while I was listening to the audiobook, so I do have it now as a physical copy, and that book is called All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is an adult sci-fi, and the basic premise that I was told of this book, so that's what I'll tell you, is that we are following a robot by the name of Murderbot, who has been created for the reason that his name suggests, to murder people, but all he wants to do is watch his soap operas. So I went into this book with that premise in mind, thinking that I was going to have a very humorous sci-fi book to read. Boy, was I wrong about that. I cannot say that it's not true, but that is the smallest thing about this book. The majority of this book went whoosh right over my head because the terminology used in this book when it comes to sci-fi was just a little too much for me. And because of that, I just really didn't appreciate this book as much as I thought I was going to going in, and I ended up giving this book 2 stars. The next book that I picked up was Misery by Stephen King. This is an adult horror. So when I read this book in March, I thought it was okay, so I gave the book 2 stars. This book, The Eyes of the Dragon, which is a Stephen King fantasy book, and I love this book. Not a lot of people did, but I did. Now, because the majority of people did not like this book, Stephen King decided to create a rebuttal, and he called it Misery. He basically said, well, if you don't like this, then stuff you, I'm gonna write this. And you know what? I love this book. The basic premise of this book is that we are following a guy whose name is Paul Sheldon, who in this fictional world is a critically acclaimed author who has written a ton of different books, but his most critically acclaimed series, particularly among women, is a series called Misery. One day, Paul Sheldon is rescued by his #1 fan, whose name is Annie, who I call Miss Annie. Miss Annie takes Paul back to her home, and if that makes her sound crazy, there's more craziness than meets the eye. Calls him a dirty birdie. She then gets a copy of the newly published final book in the Misery series, only to find out that Paul Sheldon has killed off her favourite character, Misery, and boy is she not happy about this. And she tells him how not happy she is about this, and then she puts Paul Sheldon through a world of torment. This book is what I wanted from Stephen King, and I will sing his praises to the hills for this book. I loved this book and I gave it 5 stars. It was incredible, and I highly, highly recommend this book to anyone who wants to read any kind of horror book. It was amazing. 5 stars. The final book that I read in the month of October 2020 was this book, The Guest List by Lucy Foley. Now, I was incredibly excited when I was talking about this book with my October TBR because, as I said, this book sounded like it had a lot of different things, but that no one was going to be questing anywhere because it's set on an island. And if you recall my October TBR, I said, good luck, Lucy Foley. If you can make this work, then we will have a book that doesn't have us venturing out anywhere. We're on an island, we're staying on the island, we're not moving from the island, and it works. I gave this book 4 stars, which goes to show that Lucy Foley, all in all, did a good job. Now, this is an adult mystery/thriller book, a multi-perspective then and now. So yes, you heard me right, it's all of those in one. We are following 5 different perspectives, and we are also going back and forth between what's happening currently and what happened 24 hours ago. So if you can wrap your head around all that, I will say that this is a good book. It took me a long time to wrap my head around. So the basic premise of this book is that we are following the bride, the bridesmaid, the +1, the best man, and the wedding planner, who are all on this island because they are involved in a wedding that is going to take place. And then we get to the reception, and something has happened at the reception, and it becomes a whodunit. By the time I got to the end of the second third of this book, I was so excited, and then the reveal was amazing. Oh my gosh. I have read thrillers this year, you guys, that did not hold a candle to this book. This is the best mystery thriller that I've read this year. But I will say you need to get used to the writing style. You need to get through that first third to get used to the multi-perspective then and now. Once you're used to that, once you become invested in the characters, you are in for a treat with this book. If you are a mystery thriller fan and you've been let down like I have been, this is the book you need to pick up. It's worth the 4 stars that it received. These are the books that I read in the month of October. Thank you so very much for watching. Letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'll see you guys again soon. Mwah! Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading! Bye guys! Bye!